Family Farm Defenders actually was one of the winners of the U.S. Food Sovereignty World Food Prize, Sovereignty Prize, a couple years ago in New Orleans, and that's why it's exciting for us to be here tonight to share this moment with all of you. I first encountered the concepts of food sovereignty back in 1999 in Seattle. Were there people in Seattle here? World Bank, World WTO protests? Okay, yes, okay. Well, that's when I first met people from Via Campesina, and they had, as George mentioned, brought the concept of food sovereignty to the world in 1996. And the original idea behind food sovereignty is it was going to be an alternative to the idea of corporate globalization. I don't know how many of you in your struggles have encountered the problem with, well, we know what you're against, but what are you for? What are you for? What's the vision of an alternative world? What do you want to see? And that's where Via Campesina came up with the idea of food sovereignty. So that's why it's such an empowering concept for many of us. I was lucky enough to be in Nailani, Mali in 2007 for the World Food Sovereignty meeting there. Farmers from all around the world gathered there. And then 2011 in Oakland is when we formed the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance, because we wanted to be able to bring this concept to the United States and promote the concept here. So, and my group, Family Farm Defenders, is one of the founding organizations of the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance. So I was thinking tonight about how to phrase this for people, and one thing I thought recently is George Orwell. Some of you might be familiar with his writings, but he once wrote that we have statues honoring politicians and bishops, but we don't have statues honoring cooks and gardeners. And that's something to think about, how we don't really celebrate the people in our food system who provide, the most important thing we have in our lives in many ways, water, food, shelter. So I'm really proud to be here tonight amongst all of you. I assume a lot of you are cooks and gardeners. We have a lot of farmers in the audience, people who are preparing food, people who are processing food. And so I feel really lucky to be amongst cooks and gardeners. You are sowing the seeds of justice. You are nourishing peace in your communities through your work in the food system, right? So unfortunately, we are dealing with a very alternative world, which George mentioned earlier, right? In this nightmarish world, increasingly dominated by institutions, their only goal is to squeeze every last ounce of profit out of the earth, out of our food system, out of us as workers and farmers and consumers. And that is just unacceptable, right? We need to have more local control, grassroots democracy in our food system. A lot of people in the US, like food sovereignty is sort of a difficult concept to get your head around. I don't have to explain it to indigenous people. There's some probably native folks here. They totally know the idea of sovereignty and when you don't have it and why you should have it. But the idea of local democratic control is something most Americans can grasp, right? We should have more democracy, not less. We should have more of a say in what we eat and how we grow things. And that's what food sovereignty is all about. We do not believe in agribusiness. We believe in agriculture. Agriculture, right? So I think it really devalorizes, cheapens food when we turn it into a commodity, when it doesn't have social relationships behind it, when it doesn't express our care for the earth, for each other. We want a food system that's not just fast, cheap, easy, convenient. We want a food system that's just, fair, delicious, and rich in diversity. That's the type of food system I want. Now, many of you might notice in your communities, I grew up on a farm, I'll admit. I grew up on a farm in central Minnesota. Farmers around me are getting older. I was told to get big or get out in my high school by my ag teacher, or else go to the Twin Cities and find a job, or join the military. Those are the choices I was given growing up in rural America, right? But that doesn't need to be the future. I mean, children shouldn't have to flee to the cities. Children should be proud to become farmers in their own community, right? Not that we can't be farmers in the city. Urban agriculture is very important. We need more farmers in the city. Farmland's being gobbled up by absentee landowners, corporate speculators. Unacceptable. We need more farmers, not less. We need more people on the land, not less. Especially people who are producing food that we can eat. Farm workers and food workers. How many people here are farm workers or food workers? I'm a food worker. I've worked in coffee shops. I produce food every day, right? Farm workers and food workers are being exploited by horrible work conditions, unfair wages, cruel immigration policies. That needs to change, right? That needs to change. Our scarce public resources are being squandered on global weapons sales, violent military occupations. I mean, we have a winner this evening who's going to talk about what it's like living under occupation. Many of us could talk about what it's like to live under occupation, sadly. Forced displacement, that's unacceptable in a food sovereignty world. Unacceptable. So unfortunately, the victims are not just farmers, food workers, and consumers, but the earth itself. Climate change. The climate crisis is upon us. I was in Copenhagen in 2009 with the Via Campesina group. We were in the streets, 100,000 people in Copenhagen, demanding climate change from our governments, right? I'll admit Obama was a horrible disappointment in Copenhagen, right? We just had 400,000 people in New York, right, demanding climate change. And we have all these false promises out there of how to solve climate change, right? Agrofuels will solve it. Smart climate-ready crops will solve it. Geoengineering will solve it. But we know what the real solution to climate change is. Small farmers can feed the world and cool the planet. That's the real solution to climate change. That's the real one. So tonight we are greatly honored to be sharing the hard work and powerful inspiration by the winners of this year's, Food Sovereignty Prize. And these brothers and sisters who are here representing, we have Palestine, we have Washington State. I mean, we had lots of great nominees. I was on the nomination committee for this prize. This is the type of prize which there's lots of potential winners out there. And we're very excited that they're here tonight. And so I'll just close with a comment from Martin Luther King Jr., which many of you might be familiar with as well. But he once said that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I would really hope that we think, all of us here, that food matters. And not just food itself, but how we produce the food, where it comes from, who made it, what it means to us. That food matters enough to us that we are willing to speak truth to power, that we're willing to be inspired today and go back to our communities and make change, make food sovereignty a reality in our own communities. And that is what's going to change the world.